Hello, and thank you for joining us for our second Roundtable eClub Book Club Meet the Author session. Tongue twister. Roundtable is an association for guys under the age of 45 who like to meet up and plan social events and fundraisers. eClub is an online version of Roundtable for guys who may not have a club near to them, and Book Club is one of several online events we plan, which are open to non-members and run alongside the quarterly question and answer sessions our chairman does with people we think members would like to hear from. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the author we'll be meeting tonight, Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is a British fantasy and science fiction author who is best known for his series Shadows of the Apt and for his novel Children of Time, which we'll be discussing tonight, which in 2016 was awarded the 30th Arthur C. Clarke Award. Author James Lovegrove described it as superior stuff, tackling big themes: gods, messiahs, artificial intelligence, alienness with brio. We also have self-confessed bookworm and blogger Dan Stubbings, who's going to run through some of the questions we have put together for Adrian, whilst the rest of us sit here in the background and listen in. Over to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Steve. Wonderful introduction. So the first question, Adrian, that I have is actually come from James, who's part of our audience, and he's wondering what made you decide to go into the mind of another creature. Obviously, in Children of Time, it's spiders, but make sure that they stayed unique and you didn't make them humanized. It became very, you stayed true to their actual nature. And didn't make them humanized like we've seen in some previous novels. I mean, obviously you've done it with dogs in Dogs of War, and we see it with the ants in Children of Time. So what was the process behind you choosing spiders? Because for a lot of people, spiders terrify them.
I mean, that's actually one reason why spiders. The main reason why spiders is there is some real world research by a New Zealand scientist called Dr. Fiona Cross into the behavior of the portiaid jumping spiders. So the stuff in the very early chapter when the spiders are just sort of genuine Earth spiders, that's all based on the real observed behaviors that she was able to reproduce in the lab. They are incredibly intelligent creatures given their very limited neural architecture. And having read that research, I very much wanted to do a thought experiment where they, what if they became the dominant species on a planet? And the actual, the plot and the actual science fiction of the book was kind of built up around that to give me an excuse, effectively, to do that. And so, although I always have a preference for aliens that are actually plausibly alien rather than the kind of pointy ears and wrinkly forehead sort of TV and film aliens we often see, it was also very much hardwired into the concept of the book that, because that is what the book is about from start to finish. It is about the development of a society of from very non-human creatures. As well as that, though, there's a weird tradition I'm kind of plugging into, especially in Eastern European literary tradition, where you use particularly insects and things like that as symbolic of different aspects of human nature, which we see in Pelevin and we see in Kafka and the insect play and things like that. And also, it's a book about empathy. It's a book about contacting with the other. It is a science fiction first contact book in a very, very long and grand tradition within the genre. And the key thing about the book is being able to see the other as equal to yourself, which is a thing that people have problems with other people, let alone actual aliens or spiders or whatever you might meet. And if you're going to do that, then the big challenge is doing it with something that is like a spider. Spiders are, in our culture at least, the most loathed and despised of all creatures, really. They are the single thing that I suspect more people than anything else are afraid of, or don't like, or will kill on the sight. And therefore, if you can do a book, as hopefully I have done, where people come out feeling very sympathetic for the spiders, then that's that's kind of like mission accomplished.
I definitely would agree with that. I know especially when I'm reading it, and I've read it now I think 9 times. So obviously doing this allowed me to get my annual reread out the way. But every time I read it, I always find that I like spending more time with the spiders than I do the humans. And you do end up finding yourself rooting for the spiders. Thank you very much. That's a wonderful lead into the next question that I have to ask. How on earth did you prevent yourself from getting lost in the research rabbit hole? Because you must have had to go through so many things and check so many things as you were writing the novel. And was there anything that you found that was unexpected that didn't make the final edits, but you wish you could have put in the book by the end?
So the advantage I've got in this particular field is it's an area that I've always been interested in, and therefore most of the research the book required has been picked up before the book was even conceived of. The balance, certainly the spider-related balance, very much came from through ridiculous chance. The brother of my housemate at university is the curator of entomology at the Natural History Museum, which means that I basically got an in that I can just call up and say, hey, I would really like to come and discuss giant spiders and the kind of the logistical problems thereof. And that was very useful. And also the whole business with the porcid beetles and the way that they defeat the ants, which was literally the bit I was just writing when I went to the museum to talk to people, all came out of a chance mention that one of the staff there made after coming back from an expedition where he'd been collecting those beetles and was talking about the way the ants reacted around them, which got me out of a hole that I dug for myself because I couldn't work out how the spiders would beat the ants. As far as things that didn't make the cut, I was constantly trying to find an excuse to go and look at the stomatopods, which are the other kind of sentient race on the planet, which get mentioned plenty of times, but in that way that you kind of, if it had been in a film, you would suspect that there was a cut sequence at some point involving them because they keep getting mentioned and then you never really meet them. And I just couldn't work out a way of making them important enough to the plot to spend time on them. So that's the bit I regret. Although I kind of repurposed what I was going to do with them for some of the sequences in Doors of Eden.
Which is an absolutely incredible book. If you guys haven't read it, get on Doors of Eden. It's wonderful and challenges so many things and it goes through so many themes. It is frightening how complex and how beautifully written Adrian's produced with Doors of Eden. So if you haven't read it, get on it ASAP. Obviously, you've now turned the universe that the Children of Time is setting into a trilogy. Obviously, with Children of Ruin and now Children of Memory that was recently released. Was that always an idea, or did it just grow organically and said, you know, I can't leave this story behind. I need to see how these creatures would develop over a certain period of time?
I mean, that sounds way better than the actual truth, to be honest. So it was very much a standalone book, and it was also a bit of a weird punt because when I brought it out, I was a fantasy author, and I was sort of modestly successful with that. Enough so that when I turned up with this weird idea for a book about spiders in outer space, the publishers rather grudgingly let me write it and put it out. But it was very much small fry as far as they were concerned, and it was sort of tacitly understood I'd get back to the unicorns and the swords and things after that. But instead, of course, it completely blew up with the mostly once it hit the Clark Award shortlist. And now I am a science fiction writer who occasionally is grudgingly allowed to write a fantasy book. So it wasn't envisaged as a series at all. And it is, I think it didn't need to be a series. It's a very nicely self-contained book. And it's, although there are a sequence of books where you basically have to have read one to read the next one, each book is very self-contained as far as its plot. And there is no grand spanning kind of overplot that follows through the books. Also, it's worth noting it may not be a trilogy, because if I have an idea for another one, I'll write it. I know the publishers have released it saying it's the last book of the series, and that's not anything they got from me. So it's all down to whether the relevant ideas sort of congeal at some point as to whether another one turns up. So yes, each book kind of turned up on its own merits. Although I am not going to lie that there was a certain internal pressure on me to think, well, I should probably write another one purely from a commercial point of view, because the first book did so well.
I mean, is that obviously a frightening thing for yourself when a book does so well, like Children of Time has? Obviously gets a major award. I believe it's a two-time Arthur Clarke winner, if I remember right. Is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, books can only be
Yeah.
up for the Clarke once anyway.
Right.
But and I've Cage of Souls was nominated as the only other kind of
Right.
the only other situation I've been in with the Clarks.
Okay. I knew you'd been up for another one, but I wasn't sure whether it was Children of Time or another book. Cage of Souls is also brilliant. If you haven't read that, guys, definitely get on that. I've got to be careful in this interview not to gush, because Adrian is my favourite author, as he knows. I've told him many times, and I've read every single book he's ever had published. Another question from James is, he wants to know how on earth you find time during your busy writing to paint your miniature figures that he sees on Twitter and things. He follows you on there. He said he's got loads himself, not finished, not done, and he was wondering, does that hobby of yours impact upon your writing, and if so, in what ways does it impact?
No, I mean, the miniature painting and my occasional kind of sketching is very much my de-stressing activity. So I have an enormous drive to create stuff, as you know, as my writing output shows. But it's frequently in a not terribly healthy way, in that there's a very limited amount of time I can go without writing new stuff before I get very, very jittery. If I am sketching or if I'm painting figures, I'm doing something that relaxes me, but also has an end result that you can look at and that you feel you've achieved something. So it ticks all the boxes for me, just as a hobby. Also, bizarrely, when I was like 15 and collecting miniatures way back, I could not paint worth a damn, and I'm not quite sure how I can now do it even halfway decently. But it just seems to have turned up as it's probably patience, I guess. But
I mean, I love seeing it on your Twitter feed. It's always and especially when you do your October art. I love that. I love following that and seeing the different things that you create on a daily basis, because it just gives you a nice laugh and a bit of a joke, and you think, and you are so creative. And that's one thing that I would like to ask. Basically, how on earth do you just seem to write and publish so many books in a year? Not just massive size, but just of such quality that I know that if I pick up your book, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to discover something that I've not encountered before. I find your ideas extremely original. I never feel that I've read it before. I'm just wondering, from somebody who's trying to write himself, how do you get over that self-doubt and know that whatever you produce, regardless of the idea or the world that you're creating in, is going to be something that someone's going to want to read?
You never do. I always, I still always worry that whatever the thing I'm working on is not going to be up to snuff. And frequently also, there are always bits that that do repay a revisit and a kind of a thorough edit before it gets sent on. I mean, I suspect most authors are in the same situation. You'd never really know that the tap is going to, water will continue coming out of the tap when you turn it on. And I suspect that my method of coming to peace with that is to write as much as I can as quickly as possible, so that if someone does cut the water off, I've at least produced a fairly decent body of work. But yeah, I mean, it's very much one of those sort of fish gotta swim sort of situations. It is the thing that I do, is write, and and have ideas for writing, and that's just thankfully how my brain is set up and how I've trained my brain to work.
So one question that I was going to ask, so obviously with the complex themes that are discussed in Children of Time, how long was the idea for Children of Time within your mind, and when did you feel confident enough as a writer to say, this is a book that I'm going to write? Because obviously, like you've said, at the time you were seen as a fantasy author. You'd had wonderful, well, like, I think you're being very humble, but you'd had really good success with your fantasy books. What made you say, I'm gonna park that and I'm gonna write this idea? And how long did it, how long was that idea there? Because it is such a vastly connected and complex, wonderful book.
I mean, I can't say for sure because it was quite a while back now. I suspect that I remember talking about the idea to Justina Robson coming back from a convention, what must have been a couple of years beforehand. So it was stewing away then. I mean, it was really, ever since I read the research, I was kicking around, how can I make this work? And then obviously the actual story elements that give that logical framework to being able to explore the spider society and the spider planet kind of came together right towards the end of that process, when I actually decided, yes, I've got an opportunity to write it. It's worth noting, and this is kind of indicative of how I work. It was whilst it was obviously a departure from my normal writing, it didn't. I was already not giving up on the fantasy, because the I think The Tiger and the Wolf came out, or at least was written before Children of Time, and certainly we already knew there was going to be another 3 fantasy books in the pipeline. So, like I say, it was very much just that I will effectively take a brief holiday from fantasy to do this science fiction book. And it's worth. Fantasy is definitely still the big thing, but when I was growing up, it was very much with a science fiction world, and I read mostly science fiction. So the idea of I would really like just to have written a science fiction book was extremely appealing. And
I'll
so
just jump in on the back of that. So you kind of mentioned about, it was the research that started the book, and one of the things for me that I found really fascinating was the whole kind of God complex or messianic, sort of complex thing. So I take it from what you're saying that kind of came second then?
Yes. So basically, I knew I wanted to write a book about the evolution of sentient spiders. I needed to have a device that somehow crunched the time scale enough. That originally I was kicking about the idea of doing very, very near light travel to deal with the 2 timescales. Because I knew I needed humans around to give a door to the reader, basically, because if I did the whole book with just spiders, that wasn't going to fly. And so it was very much just working out, almost kind of building the world in reverse. Like, well, what do I need from the world in order to get this idea to work? And that led to things. It led to the timescale was brought down from millions of years to a few thousand years by the nanovirus. And that, of course, leads on to people like Avrana Kern and what she's doing, and also, because I still needed at least a few thousand years to make it remotely plausible, the whole crash of human civilization and rebuilding. And so it all kind of, I worked out what shape effectively that side of the story needed to be. And then it was a matter of just working out a logical framework that fit that shape well enough. And like I say, I tried a few ones, and I'm very glad I decided on the whole going in and out of cold sleep as a way to deal with the time, because that actually opened up a whole load of kind of knock-on plot elements about Holston just finding the ship in all of these different conditions every time he wakes up, which you wouldn't have got if you just had the continuity of, oh well, for them it's just a couple of years, even though thousands of years are going by outside.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a thing that I want to pick up on. I mean, my two favorite characters in it is I like Bianca on the spider side. I think she's my favorite, and then on the humans, it's obviously Holton, where you see him obviously see the changes in the woman he loves in Lane, because obviously they I don't want to give any plot spoilers, but something quite important happens between them. What? Obviously, he's seen as an old man when he joins the crew anyway. I mean, was it hard for you to obviously make sure that he didn't age too much, so that it would just become completely implausible that he would still be there and still be able to be imported into a cold sleep?
I mean, it helps that he's almost completely useless. So, as he's well aware, he's only ever going to come out of cold sleep when there's some particularly unusual situation comes. So he is very much, everyone else is aging faster than him because everyone else is needed more than he is. And so, and also, I mean, honestly, given that the plan is that the crew are going to be in cryosleep for almost the entire journey, I think that the only point that people start going really aging excessively as towards the end of the book is when things are going wrong enough on the ship that it requires people to stay awake for protracted periods of time. So obviously, when which points Holston is probably almost the youngest member of the crew by the time the end of the book comes around.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love that element because obviously he was trying to preserve Earth, and then obviously as he progresses through the book, he basically says to the crew members, should we be following their lead, especially when they're thinking of poisoning the planet. I thought that was a very poignant moment where he actually obviously challenges it and says, we shouldn't be making the same mistakes. I mean, was that a conscious decision? Because
but the interesting thing there is, so yes, obviously the humans are having to make some tough decisions, and the decisions are being made by people who are not the most tolerant and not the most necessarily even rational at various points in the book. So Holston is interesting from a literary point of view. Holston is an interesting figure because he is the protagonist. He is the central character of the book, but he is not the hero of the book because he doesn't do anything. And this is actually quite common, which is quite common with my because it's one of those maxims that people will tell you about writing, which is not necessarily true, is that yes, you've got to have the active hero who drives the plot forward. No, you don't. You can actually absolutely have an observing hero. I do it with a number of books. I do it with we mentioned Cage of Souls, and Stefan Advani in Cage of Souls does almost nothing, but he sees everything. He's always in the right place to either see things or not to be dead. So that he can continue to narrate the story. And Holston is very similar. So the on the human side, the hero of the book is Isa Lane. Absolutely, she is the savior of humanity. But we don't see all of her story because Holston is asleep for large chunks of it. And the thing about Holston has a broader perspective than most of the other humans because he is the scholar, the classicist. He understands that they are at various points in the book making the wrong decision. He voices his doubts about it, but he doesn't do anything. And so his kind of chief flaw is when the chips are down, even though he knows that a decision may be the wrong decision, he doesn't actually try and stop it happening. There isn't that bit that you see in some science fiction books where the guy decides, right, I'm going to shut down the reactor now so that the kind of the captain who's gone mad can't make the terrible decision. Holston just kind of goes along with everything and gets passed hand to hand and kind of occasionally he's almost like a Greek chorus. He raises, he says things and raises complaints and flags up issues, but he doesn't actually act at any point. He doesn't have quite the courage of his convictions. So which makes him an interesting character, because he's obviously, here's our point of view, he's sympathetic, he's not a bad man, but the more you kind of examine the way he acts, the more it's hard to actually say, well, actually, is he actually a good person in any way? And it's, I mean, the most controversial character in all of the books is Adrian Tchaikovsky, who's also the character I love writing for more than anybody else. Well, all of the whole sort of smeared continuum that is Adrian Tchaikovsky. But one that I'm always thrown online when people talk about her as a villain, and to me, she's never been a villain. But actually, then when you start to look at the way I present her, I'm absolutely casting her as a villain an awful lot of the time, except that mostly that's just because it makes her much more fun to write for. And the more you look at the decisions that Kern make, the less actually, even though she's kind of that mad scientist villain archetype, she, unlike Halston, she does make the great decisions a lot of the time. She does make the self-sacrificing decisions a lot of the time. She just cackles a lot when she's doing it.
I agree with you. I don't think she's a villain. I think you needed her in that book to show the extremes that she was prepared to go to, but you also see her change her mentality as well when she obviously finds out that she's not speaking to monkeys, she's speaking to spiders, and she's obviously got to find a completely different way of communicating, which I love. Like I said, I've read it 9 times, and I get a different message each time I read it. I mean, the ending itself, I might be wrong, but I think I heard you saying in another interview that you had 4 endings that could have potentially occurred, and you decided on that one once you got there because it all fitted together.
Not quite that. So the way I usually, with most of my books, I plan them very heavily, except that I never plan the end. And so what I generally hope for is that the momentum of the book to that point will let me know what the end.
Oh, no problem, Steve. Will do.
What the end is going to be. And in this case, it was, as I was getting towards the end, it was very obvious there were some potential solutions to the human versus spider situation, and there were 2 potential solutions, which would be the spiders win or the humans win, and the other group doesn't survive. And so I was very happy when actually the spiders basically, independently of me, came up with a solution to the situation, which was far more interesting, I hope, and far more optimistic and positive than just having a big old spiders versus human sort of alien style battle. But yeah, I mean, I let the endings sort themselves out, and so far it's always worked.
That must be nice and give you confidence as a reader that you know, and I might not know the ending, but when I get there, it will present itself, which must be nice.
There's always the first time for it not to work.
Well, touch wood, it's worked so far, especially with the City of Last Chances, which I finished recently. Thoroughly enjoyed. Great return to fantasy. So well done on that one, Adrian.
Thank you. I think that's that. Honestly, I feel that's one of my best. I enjoyed writing that book so much.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I've read everything you've had published, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for releasing that book. It was a joy. It was a much needed read. Unfortunately, we're coming close to the end of our time. I just want to thank you for obviously coming and joining us and being so engaging with the questions. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to interview you. I have to say I was incredibly nervous, so you've made me feel very at ease, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm sure our audience has as well, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it next time we meet. So before we go, I'd just like everyone, if you wouldn't mind, give a nice round of applause for Adrian, give him a thanks, and continue reading these books.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
But really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Adrian. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. We'll stop the recording on that, but we have got 3 minutes left. But yeah, I think, yeah, Adrian, I don't want to butt in too much, but I was just like sort of bursting with questions and that. And I think, yeah, and I think I just love the way kind of the whole virus thing at the beginning becomes the salvation at the end, and empathy, and it's such an important message for humankind. And I really enjoyed that part of it. And yeah, if only, especially given what we're going through at the minute, if only that you could inject that virus into the human race, it might save us.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I think that was kind of where my thinking was going, because obviously we were, I mean, this is like 2016 and we were just watching the, I think 2014, 15. So I guess things weren't, the world situation wasn't kind of catastrophic at that point, but there's always something where you think just that little extra ability to empathize would do so much good.
Just sort things out all together. Never mind the oil barons and making their quick buck. It'd be like that. Would be sorted, wouldn't we? But yeah, that's awesome. And like I say, it's the first book I've read of yours, and absolutely I'll be looking to read more. Certainly the other books in the trilogy, or the if it's 4 books, is it a quadrilogy? I don't know.
Tetralogy, I think. I mean, the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it's for me, a trilogy is a planned book with one long plot as well as individual books.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I mean, I guess it's like it's a sequence or whatever on earth, because it's it is very much a series of individual stories that follow on from one another.
I mean, I've just started reading Children of Memory, so no spoilers, guys, if you've read it. It is very, very different, I would say, from Children of Ruin. But it's a lovely different, and it's nice to see you as a writer obviously extend that universe, give us a different viewpoint.
I think that's what I have to do really with this particular series. I didn't feel I could just keep on doing a kind of an uplifted species of the week thing from book to book, and so each book needs to have a point to make over and above whatever I'm doing with the kind of the uplift and the neurobiology and so forth. And so if I do more, they will hopefully then be different again, rather than just trying to retread the same ground.
Yeah.
And the ending does come together nicely.
Thank you.
I've just started Children of Ruin last week, so we're really getting into that now. So enjoying it.
Excellent.
Cool. Less than a minute. I just want to say again, thank you so much for your time, Adrian. It's really massively appreciated, and it's been really, really good having you on. And
it's been absolutely grand. I'm very happy to come back some other time to talk about a different book if you like.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That'd be brilliant.
Walking to Aldebaran is a good one to talk about.
Ooh, yeah, very happy.
My head. That one was a mess.
Guns at Dawn, maybe. I love that one.
Oh yeah, that's one I really, really wish had done better, because I could certainly write a sequel to that one, but it just didn't quite make the numbers, sadly.
Oh,
we're going to suddenly get cut off, won't we?
Yeah, well, to save that, excellent. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to
thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.